today we're going to speak a little bit about this time of the year, this period of time between Passover and Shavuot, the 7 weeks period. And particularly, we're going to focus on one, I would say, mythical figure, a great hero of this period of time. I would say that there are two heroes during this period of time, okay, in terms of, Jewish history. One hero was Rabbi Akiva, the great Rabbi Akiva, and the second hero is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. No, not Bar Kochba, Bar Yochai. Don't confuse between the two. Bar Kochba was the leader of a revolt against Rome by the time of Rabbi Akiva. 132. That was the year, Common Era. That was Bar Kochba's rebellion or revolt against Rome. And Rabbi Akiva was a big supporter of Bar Kochba at that time. So as you know, this time of the year is called Sfirat HaOmer. Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. So each day is counted from second night of Passover until Shavuot in a progressive way. We are adding a day per day, and we keep adding on a daily basis until we reach the 49th day, and the 50th day is Shavuot. And this is a period of time known as a period of mourning. Okay, in Jewish tradition, for instance, for very traditional Jews, there are no weddings, no parties. They wouldn't listen to music, no haircuts, things like that. It's a day of mourning. It starts from the second night of Passover until the 33rd day of the counting, which is Lag BOmer. Lag BOmer, as you know, is the 33rd day of the counting. Something special happened that day. Something miraculous, okay, outstanding. So that kind of brings the mourning to a stop. And it became kind of a day of, kind of a festival, semi-festival. I wouldn't call Lag BOmer a real festival, okay? Like Passover or any other Yontif, okay? But it's still a festive day, commemorated by many thousands of Jews around the world. Particularly in one place, one center, in which, that place is buried. Shimon Bar Yochai is buried there. You know the place, the name of the place in Israel? Are you familiar with, it became very famous in Jewish imagery and Jewish life. Let me write down in chat. I'm going to write the name of the village. It's a village, Meron. Meron is in the Galilee, northern Israel, a place of mountains, surrounded by mountains, pretty close to Tiberiades, okay? So Meron became a place, a center of pilgrimage, in which thousands and thousands of Jews were going up there in order to commemorate Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's yahrzeit, anniversary of death. And it's a day, so what are they doing there in Meron? They are lighting bonfires. and singing and dancing. It's like, Woodstock, the Jewish Woodstock. It's a huge gathering. Okay, thousands and thousands, not necessarily Orthodox Jews. I mean, for Shiva's life, people from all walks of life, they're coming there uh, uh, in honor of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, which I would say, and we're going to talk later on about him, about this figure, Rabbi Shimon. He's going to be at the center of our class today. I would say that Shimon Bar Yochai is the closest to a saint in Judaism. Something very, very special. And you might ask, why is it that on his yahrzeit, which should be a sad day, of course, a commemoration of his death, became like a festival and a day of joy, and very eccentric day around his tomb, which became kind of a shrine, like a temple, okay, center of devotion. By the way, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was the most outstanding disciple of Rabbi Akiva. You see, there is a connection between the two. And this period of time, I forgot to tell you at the beginning, became a period of mourning because most of Rabbi Akiva's students died on that period, according to tradition. It seems that there was a plague that impacted all his students. Thousands of students died, and he had to start a new beginning, kind of a new school from scratch. Okay, that was a huge tragedy, known as the death of Rabbi Akiva's students. But Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was one of the most outstanding students of Rabbi Akiva, disciples. Okay, he followed in his master's footsteps. And according to tradition, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is the author of the book of Zohar. I'm going to write it down here in the chat. Zohar. The book of Zohar is the major book of Jewish mysticism or Kabbalah. Wow. So Zohar, the authorship of the Zohar is attributed to Shimon Bar Yochai. That doesn't mean that he wrote it from the historical perspective. The book itself, according to critics or to historians, contemporary historians, the book itself, the Zohar, was written later in history, 13th century, 13th century in Spain, by a scholar known as Moshe de Leon. So depending who you ask, if you are asking me, I'm going to tell you who wrote the Zohar, Moses de Leon, or Moshe de Leon. But if you ask more traditional Jews, they would say, with a more Orthodox leaning, they're going to tell you, of course, Zohar was written by Shimon Bar Yochai, no question about it. So he's the author of the Zohar, which is the mystical, the greatest, one of the greatest books of the Zohar, of Kabbalah. I'm not going to go into Kabbalah today. Perhaps in the next class, we're going to do some explanation and context about Kabbalah, which in itself is a school of thought. And I would say that Shimon Bar Yochai was, I would say, one of its pioneers. So the festival of Lag BOmer in Meron, in that place, it's called Hilula, the Hilula of Shimon Bar Yochai. Hilula, it's in Aramaic, which means the festival, the party, if you wish, the big happening around Shimon Bar Yochai, because his students believe that on that day, the day before his departure, okay, he revealed lots of secrets or deep meanings of the Torah. Kabbalistic secrets, if you wish. Kabbalistic. Kabbalistic means the deeper meaning. Okay, the verses beyond the verses. So since that day he revealed so deep secrets, the house became full of light. So in order to celebrate, okay, that day of revelation, people used to dance and rejoice on that day. By the way, and I'm very sad to tell this fact, but you know, last year, 2021, there was a big accident, I would say, disaster in Meron that took place in Meron. I don't know if you remember the episode. It was the biggest, the deadliest disaster in modern Israeli history. So there was kind of a stampede of thousands of people in one little place. Okay, so there were over 45 people killed or died in the episode, and over hundreds injured, wounded. 45 died from 13 to 56 or 60. You know, that was a major tragedy. They are still, by the way, they are still investigating. What happened there? Who is to blame? Who is responsible? You know, no, because of the lack of security, of safety measures. So, of course, the place was overcrowded. So such a tragedy could have been prevented, of course, with more serious preparation. Okay, but this is in parentheses. Unfortunately, I mean, for this year, if any of you would like to go to Maron, Lag BOmer is next week, okay, the 18th, May the 18th. Now there are more safety measures, or more strict, I would say. Now you've got to buy a ticket, and you can stay there, I think, no more than 3 hours, and only one bonfire on the tomb itself. No more spread out bonfires, you know, bonfires everywhere. So it's more focused on one place and with stricter measures. So if any of you would like to go, please make the reservation. Get your ticket beforehand. Okay, we're going to speak a little bit about why Shimon Bar Yochai became so famous, and his yortzeit so celebrated. Okay, this is amazing. I think it's perhaps the only one whose death is remembered in such a way. Okay, with such joy and spirit, you know, and with such a huge crowd. Perhaps the only exception being there is a Hasidic rabbi or Rebbe, you know, in Ukraine, by the way, Rabbi Nachman Bratslav also. There are huge crowds coming to celebrate his memory or his teachings. But Shimon Bar Yochai, of course, is the peak. So who's Shimon Bar Yochai? He was a sage who lived in the 2nd century. As I mentioned before, he was a disciple of Rabbi Akiva. And I would like to present you today, instead of telling you the story, okay, as you know, my approach is text-based. I want to see the text up front, okay, firsthand. I want you to see the text, to study Talmud together. That's my intention. Let's study Talmud together. We're going to read a passage of the Talmud which speaks about how his story got started, or his legend had developed, okay? That's my intention today. We're going to read from Masechet Shabbat, from the Tractate of Shabbat. We're going to read the story, and we're going to comment on it. Are you okay with that?
That's good.
And I would invite you to see the story as kind of a Netflix series of 4 episodes. Okay. Let's study this story in 4 episodes. There are short episodes, okay? And it's going to be also a 5th episode. I'm not sure we're gonna go over it because of lack of time. But there are basically the 4 episodes, and this legend became kind of a popular legend. Perhaps most of you have heard about this story, but I wanted you to see directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Is it big enough?
I can read it. I don't know if everyone else can see it on their device.
What about the rest? I can make it a bit bigger. Okay. Okay, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, as you see, it's from Masechet Shabbat, 33b. Okay, go ahead. Let's see the first episode.
All right. In this Barita,
oh, sorry.
Scout, Scout, come. Scout, Scout, come.
In this Barita, Rabbi Yehuda is described as head of the speakers in every place. The Gemara asks, and why do they...
By the way,
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just to explain some terms. For instance, when it says Gemara, means Talmud. Is a synonym of Talmud. Rabbinical literature, the set of volumes of rabbinical thought, okay, or Torah commentaries. It's called either Talmud or Gemara. Okay, the Gemara asks.
Yeah, it relates that this resulted due to an incident that took place when Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yosei and Rabbi Shimon were sitting, and Yehuda, son of converts, sat beside them. Rabbi Yehuda opened and said, "How pleasant are the actions of this nation, the Romans, as they established marketplaces, established bridges, and established bathhouses." Rabbi Yossi was silent. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai responded and said, "Everything that they established only for their own purposes. They established marketplaces to place prostitutes in them, bathhouses to pamper themselves, and bridges to collect taxes from all who pass over them." Yehuda, son of converts, went and related their statements to his household. And those statements continued to spread until they were heard by the monarchy. They ruled and said, "Yehuda, who elevated the Roman regime, shall be elevated. and appointed as head of the sages, the head of the speakers in every place. Yossi, who remains silent, shall be exiled from his home in Judea as punishment, and sent to the city of Tzipori in the Galilee, and Shimon, who denounced the government, shall be killed.
Okay, first episode. Okay, there were three sages discussing on, I would say, a political issue in regard to Romans' endeavors, or I would say enterprises in the land of Israel, on Judah. Say they were building, they were trying to improve the infrastructure of the land under their rule. Of course, remember, Roman rule was very oppressive, a harsh rule against the peoples that were conquered by them. So there were three sages discussing about their opinions about what Romans were doing, if it's considered a positive things or not. So there were three opinions here. As you can see, there is Rabbi Yehuda. Is known here in this chapter, Rabbi Judah or Yehuda ben Gerim, son of converts. I have no idea why the fact is relevant to the discussion, but let's see. Rabbi Yosei and Rabbi Shimon. Shimon here is Shimon Bar Yochai.
Rabbi, aren't there two Yehudas maybe?
No. It's the same Yehuda. So they are trying to explain why Rabbi Yehuda became notorious or became the head of speaker. He was not an outstanding scholar, of the statue of Rabbi Kiva or any other, or Rabbi Meir, but he was placed in this position because his positive stand in regard to the Romans. He was kind of admirer of Rome, as you see. Okay, he was praising Romans for their buildings, okay, bridges and bathhouses and high roads, bridges, marketplaces. They are big builders. They are developing the land. Okay, they are magnificent. So he was praising them. He was praising their technology or their technological work. Rabbi Yosei remained silent. He didn't commit himself. Okay, and Shimon Bar Yochai took a very critical position. Okay, what was his point?
Oh, Yochai, yeah, Shimon.
Yeah, what was his point?
Yeah.
Why?
Well, the Romans did that not for the Jews, but for themselves.
Of course. For their benefit, okay?
Right.
For their benefit, okay? They had an agenda and in their interest. They were not working favoring the Jews. So it was, I would say, hypercritical. So what happened? So finally, the Romans heard the story about this discussion, okay? Finally, and they decided to punish. There were some resolutions. For instance, what did they do with Yehuda? He was appointed as head of speakers.
Well, they elevated him.
Of course, he was awarded.
Right.
He was awarded, okay? Since he was so friendly toward the Romans, okay, they appreciated his words, his praise. So that was great. Yosei was exiled to another place. Was sent to the north, to a less important place. And Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was kind of confrontational to Rome. he was sentenced to
Death.
death. So this is the first episode.
And they went to hide.
This is the first episode. So he had to run away, okay, and to hide himself because he was kind of persecuted. He was okay. By the way, parenthesis, the first time I came across this story was not in the Talmud. I read it the first time in a book of Abraham Joshua Heschel.
Ah,
Yeah, he wrote a book on Shabbat. It's called
Yes.
the Shabbat.
yeah.
And he quotes this story of the Talmud, making a contrast between two civilizations. The Roman civilization, or the Greek Roman civilization, in which the space is considered the center of everything. It's a civilization dedicated to space, to improving the space, by buildings, by infrastructure, etc. Whereas Judaism is a philosophy or a way of thinking or thought consecrating time as opposed to space. We have sacred days, not sacred spaces. They are not as important as sacred time. In this sense, Rabbi Shimon was critical of that approach of the Romans, centering around the space for their own interest. Okay, let's see now the second episode. Go ahead.
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai and his son, Rabbi Elazar, went and hid in the study hall. Every day, Rabbi Shimon's wife would bring them bread and a jug of water, and they would eat. When the decree intensified, Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "Women are easily impressionable, and therefore there is room for concern lest the authorities torture her and she reveal our whereabouts."
He wouldn't say that. He wouldn't say that today.
No.
Politically incorrect.
I don't know how well I would stand up to torture myself. They went and they hid in a cave. A miracle occurred, and a carob tree was created for them, as well as a spring of water. They would remove their clothes and sit covered in sand up to their necks. They would study Torah all day in that manner. At the time of prayer, they would dress, cover themselves, and pray, and they would again remove their clothes afterward so that they would not become tattered. They sat in the cave for 12 years.
Oh my.
Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said,
Okay, let's see. So this is the second episode is
cave.
Rabbi Shimon and his son hiding in the cave, covered by the sand, and going out of the cave only once for prayer, and I imagine for Shabbat, using dressing for the special day. But other than that, they were sitting in the cave, eating the fruits of miraculous carob and drinking water from a spring that was created for them. Okay, this is a beautiful legend. Can you imagine two people, a father and a son, covered by sand, for such a long time, and what they were doing all the time, they were studying Torah and meditating, okay, on the depths of Torah.
Continue.
And they survive miraculously for after 12 years. Can you imagine 12 years of sitting in a cave, in a dark place, there?
And it's interesting, the sitting in the sand up to their necks. That's they buried themselves?
Yes.
To stay hidden?
Yeah, because of the situation, of course. Mm-hmm. Well, that was a better place than the.
And it's just a series of odd things, but I mean it is beautiful. But they would study Torah all day. I'm reading the same passage. They would study Torah all that day in that manner, buried in the sand. That's a feat as well.
Yeah, quite a feat. In other words, they were totally devoted to spirituality, to nurture their spiritual life. They couldn't do anything else. Okay, they were immersed all the time, and they delving into spiritual matters and talking about the deepest meaning of the Torah. Okay, sacred stories. Okay, let's go to the third episode. It starts Elijah the prophet.
Elijah the prophet came and stood at the entrance to the cave and said, "Who will inform Bar Yochai that the emperor died and his decree has been abrogated?"
So now they are free. They are free to go.
They emerged from the cave and saw people who were plowing and sowing. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said, "These people abandon eternal life of Torah study and engage in temporal life for their own sustenance." The Gemara relates that every place that Rabbi Shimon and his son Rabbi Elazar directed their eyes was immediately burned. A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Did you emerge from the cave in order to destroy my world? Return to your cave." They again went and sat there for 12 months. They said, "The judgment of the wicked in Gehenna lasts for 12 months. Surely their sin was atoned in that time." A divine voice emerged and said to them, "Emerge from your cave." They emerged. Everywhere that Rabbi Elazar would strike, Rabbi Shimon would heal. Rabbi Shimon said to Rabbi Elazar, "My son, you and I suffice for the entire world, as the two of us are engaged in the proper study of Torah."
Okay, what happened when they went out of the cave, emerged from the cave? What did they see?
People working for a living, people working but not studying Torah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So why were they so upset then? Isn't that normal for people to do the planting or harvesting the land,
Sure, they didn't have the magic or the sustenance of the carob tree and the stream of water. They actually had to bring food from the earth and feed themselves. But I think they came out with a sense of privilege and better than thou kind of feeling. They were obviously blessed, but then they took that in the wrong way. They weren't generous in their spirit. It was only one way to be. They could only, and so people not doing it were judged harshly.
Very much so, because they were able to burn with their look. Yeah. Okay, everything that they saw, that was terrible. Ripping up destruction everywhere.
Yeah.
And so the divine voice, there is kind of a divine voice. In Hebrew, it's a bat call, emerged and said to them, emerge from the cave. As you go back to the cave.
Yeah.
So you are not ready. You are not ready for the real world. Okay, you are kind of living on another dimension. Okay, you're not thinking, as you said, Dale. You're not yet. They were not thinking as let's say normal people. Okay, they were according to some specialists, some researcher. They were going through what's called altered state of mind. Altered. Okay, the fact that they spent for so long in a cave, you know, they had such a huge impact in their minds, their souls. Okay, that they became different people with an altered state of mind.
Rabbi, I kind of
like crazy, so like so upset with what they were watching. They were in front of their eyes. They were so upset that everything got burned, you know. But it was considered by God, it's himself, was considered a sin. So go back and spend an additional year as a way of rectification, a way of healing, of coming back to their senses and adopt a more, I would say, balanced view. So they had to go back to the cave and remain there for an additional year. Yes. Who wanted to say?
I didn't mean to interrupt you, but it just occurred to me that perhaps they saw themselves in a way as gods because they had immersed themselves and saw themselves as, again, as holier than thou, and they were human. So I understand when you're talking about an altered state of mind, and maybe that was part of the altered state, I don't know, but it wasn't their place. It wasn't certainly their place to destroy. It wasn't their decision to do that. So I wonder if part of that altered state was they were attributing to themselves too much power, if you would. I don't know, just occurred to me.
Yeah, but I agree with you that somehow they saw themselves as a little bit superior in terms of spirituality. They reached a higher level, perhaps the highest level possible. You know, think Dale, the consequences of being hidden in a cave for so long. Think about ourselves being 2 years, you know, under lockdown because of COVID. You know, there were consequences of that, mentally speaking, psychologically speaking. Okay, the fact that you couldn't travel, you couldn't move freely, you know, you had to stay home, keep certain, you know, restraints, etc. That affects your balance, your sense of, you know, normalcy. Okay, so the fact was that they had to go back, and they spent another year. So let's see what happened afterwards. Let's see the last episode.
As the sun was setting on Shabbat Eve, they saw an elderly man who was holding 2 bundles of myrtle branches and running at twilight.
Okay, let's see see, we are looking at this episode like Netflix episode. Okay, and try to figure out or to imagine the scene. Okay, they saw a man right before Shabbat, Friday, late afternoon, with 2 branches of myrtle. Myrtle is one of the 4 plants in Sukkot. Okay, aromatic flower. Okay, so he was holding 2 bundles, 2 branches of myrtle, and running at twilight. So he was getting ready for Shabbat.
They said to him, "Why do you have these?" He said to them, "In honor of Shabbat." They said to him, "And let one suffice." He answered them, "One is corresponding to remember the Sabbath Shabbat day to keep it holy," from Exodus. And one is corresponding to observe the Shabbat day to keep it holy, Deuteronomy. Rabbi Shimon said to his son, "See how beloved the mitzvot are to Yisrael." Their minds were put at ease, and they were no longer as upset that people were not engaged in Torah study.
Uh-huh.
As you may call it a happy ending of the story. The fourth episode, it's kind of a closure of the situation. They saw a man running and getting ready for welcoming the Shabbat with two myrtles, while one would suffice, would be enough. And he responded that corresponds to the two versions of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments appear twice in the Torah, book of Exodus and the book of Deuteronomy. The book of Exodus says, remember the day of Shabbat. And in the book of Deuteronomy, the Barim, it says, observe, Shamor. That corresponds to different facets of the Shabbat. So this guy was ready to celebrate Shabbat in all its spirit, in all its dimensions, okay? To get into Shabbat with all his heart. When they saw that, their minds were put at ease. Why?
They saw an observant and thoughtful person. They felt that the Jews did understand and observe Shabbat, honor Shabbat.
Mm-hmm.
Was there something special about what would you do with myrtle branches for Shabbat? Is there something specific?
Well, usually the myrtle or this kind of flowers are being used by Sephardic Jews in the Havdalah service. After finishing the Shabbat, the conclusion of Shabbat, it's kind of, bringing the spirit of Shabbat, the aroma of Shabbat, represented by the flowers. So somehow they got reconciled with the world as it is. So they understood that people could work the land, and celebrate Shabbat, celebrate spirituality. They don't have to suppress one aspect, the material thing, material aspect. But material life is important in order to sustain the spiritual life, or I would say to bring spiritual life into or down into the world. So Judaism is a way of, trying to find a balance between material life and spiritual life. Don't suppress any of them, okay? Try, because and don't overemphasize one of them. In the first episodes for Shimon Bar Yochai, for him the bottom line was spiritual life, was everything, okay? Being close to God, nurturing the closest relationship with God, totally spirit. Whereas he saw the people engaged in work, dirt, okay, with lower worlds, instead of occupying themselves with higher pursuits, like davening, like praying, like studying Torah. They are abandoning the essence. They are abandoning the foundations of real life. At the end of the story, in the fourth episode, when he saw that it's possible to combine, okay, spirituality with material life. This is the I would say, the point that Heschel is making in his book. Shabbat is kind of a bridge between heaven and earth. You're using material life, because without the money, in this case, you cannot buy the flowers in order to adorn Shabbat, in order to make it more beautiful. Okay, any question?
I saw one detail. Go ahead. Dale, go ahead.
No, you go ahead. Mine is an aside. Go
So
ahead.
is mine.
Oh. All right. Well, I'm a little caught up with Heschel's idea of space and time. And I'm thinking that perhaps the idea of a tent, an ohel, that we don't have to be tied down to a particular space in order to worship, in order to that we can, if we devote the time and the intention and so forth, it doesn't have to be in a particular space. So I'm not talking about the agora of the Romans kind of thing, but I'd love at some point like to go into that. I've read the Sabbath, and it was a while ago. I'd love to at some point, Rabbi, discuss that a little bit more.
About
the Heschel's idea of space and time. And then I think the only thing I could do in my mind was to think that for us as Jews, we don't, the building isn't as important as devoting our time and making that balance between the spiritual life and the material life.
Well, this is a nice commentary, and you can find some precedent, if you wish, in one Torah interpretation. There is when the Jews were commanded to build a sanctuary in the desert, a Mishkan, the Mishkan, the famous Mishkan, the first, it's called in English tabernacle, okay, the tabernacle. It says, Ve'asu li Mishkan ve'shachanti betocham. Ve'asu li Mikdash, and you will make a temple for me, and I will dwell among you. It doesn't say, according to Rashi, it doesn't say I will dwell in it, in the sanctuary. Okay.
Okay.
V'shachanti betocham, inside them. So God is inside, the divine presence inside us. And this is what Shabbat is all about. It's trying to connect ourselves with our essence, with our godly inside, godly presence. It's called in the mystical thing we talked about, Shimon Bar Yochai and Kabbalah and things like that. You know, according to the mystics, the presence of God is more visible on Shabbat. The divine presence is called Shekhinah. The Shekhinah. Okay, from shachanti, to dwell, indwelling presence, indwelling. Okay, that, by the way, this is the reason why we celebrate Shabbat. In our Kabbalah Shabbat, for instance, we begin our service singing, okay, Lechune Ranena, and all the songs and the festive spirit. This is it all started in the Middle Ages with the mystics, with the Kabbalists. They were singing praises and hymns to the Shekhinah coming, reappearing. Lecha Dodi, okay, is in praise of the Shekhinah. And a song of expectations or renewal of the hope in the restoration of the kingdom, etc. We begin the service. If you go to any traditional home, you know, there is a special reading on Shabbat, Eshet Chayil,
yes,
a woman of valor.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that? Usually, it's recited usually unfortunately in funerals. So people associate that people are not traditional minded. Okay, they are kind of connecting Eshet Chayil. It's the last chapter of the book of Proverbs. And
my
in
husband
praise
would say that to me. My husband would say that to me every Shabbat.
Every Shabbat. this is the tradition.
Mhm.
To recite, it's a praise of the woman of the house, of the Balebuste, to recite the Eshet Chayil. But originally, the custom of reciting Eshet Chayil was in honor of the Shekhinah. So the custom originated in Kabbalistic circles in order to welcome the Shekhinah among us. So Eshet Chayil, of course, it's indirectly, it speaks about the woman, of course, any woman of the house, of the housewife, okay? But philosophically speaking, theologically speaking, the center of that song, of that custom is the Shekhinah.
And is the Shekhinah the feminine aspect of God? I think I read that someplace a long time
Yes,
ago.
definitely,
Yes,
definitely,
yes. Okay.
yes. Feministic circles nowadays are highlighting the Shekhinah aspect, in their discourse. Of course, compensating somehow all the centuries or the millennia of, being discriminated somehow. So the Shekhinah is back. Okay, I have. Can we have 5 minutes more, Daniel? Because I wanted to give you a bonus track.
All right.
Like I promised you, like Netflix approach. Okay, a Netflix. You saw the 4 episodes. You see the conclusion, the happy ending, etc. So they came back to real life, with a broader spirit, and state of mind. Okay, accepting the world as it is, or as it should be as well. The two things. Okay, let's go to the last. It's a short episode. It's one of I would say a very romantic. Let's finish on a high note. Okay. Before that, now you can see the importance of Kabbalah in Jewish practice and Jewish customs. Daniel, you see, that's why Pirkei Avot is meditated upon on these days between Passover and Shavuot. Some say even go further until Rosh Hashanah, because Pirkei Avot stresses the moral virtues of people, how to improve yourself. Speaks about personal development. From Passover, how to become free, a free person, and a more spiritual person, until you reach Shavuot, in which you get the tools in order to make real progress and to connect yourself to the higher realms. Okay, so let's see the story, the romantic story I promised you. Full screen, let me share. Okay, this is an episode with Shimon Bar Yochai.
It happened in Sidon that someone married a woman, and they were married for 10 years without children. They came before Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, and the husband wanted to divorce his wife so he could marry to have children.
So that was something that was allowed. He didn't have to divorce her, but he was allowed to do it in order to fulfill the obligation multiplicate the mitzvah of bringing children to the world. Okay.
The man said to his wife, "Take any article you want from my house as a token of gratitude and go live with your parents."
He was very generous, isn't he? Whatever you want.
Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said to the husband, "Just as you were married with a feast and a wedding, so too shall you be separated with a feast." What did the wife do? She made a big feast for her husband and got him to drink too much until eventually he became drunk. Then she called to her maids and said to them, "Take him to my parents' house." In the middle of the night, he woke up and asked his wife, "Where am I? What am I doing here?" She said, "Did you not say to me, 'Any article that I have in my house you can take to your parents' house'? And hence I took you, because I have no article more precious than you." When Rabbi Shimon ben Bar Yochai heard of this incident, he prayed for them, and they had children.
So it was a very good counselor, was he?
It's a mostly romantic story.
Well, I would say that the most romantic story in the Talmud, I would say, is about Rabbi Akiva. But it's not our topic for today. Rabbi Akiva, since today we focused on Shimon Bar Yochai, the famous mystic, the famous sage, buried with along with his son Elazar in Meron, which is the where his tomb is located, and people celebrate basically in Meron, but in other places as well, with songs. There are special songs, a special folklore about Lag BOmer, besides lighting bonfires. Okay, there are songs. There's a beautiful Sephardic song, Shimon Bar Yochai, which is, if you go to any Sephardic service, okay, in the evening, you're gonna listen to Bar Yochai. It's a joyful song. Okay, so he became kind of one of the most revered masters and teachers of Judaism in the 2nd century, and connecting his memory to the early Kabbalah, connecting his memory to the early writings of the Kabbalah, since his life was kind of surrounded with such a, I would say, mystery or legends. It became kind of a mythical figure after spending so long in exile, okay, in the hiding. Okay, any question? Okay, I just one little thing. I suggested in my conversation with Abigail, we discussed about the possibility of having summer classes elsewhere, not online, but in person, and perhaps trying to find an alternative place, under the trees, a shady place, outdoors, a nice, perhaps. I'm just, suggesting, like lunch and learn under the trees, under the shade of the trees, perhaps. But that was just a suggestion I made to Abigail. So you've got to consider, please, consider that option. Discuss it between yourselves and see if that's possible or desirable. If you would like to have such a change, instead of having it online, which is, I would say, it's not the same as meeting in person.
Yeah.
Okay, I'd rather have it in person, but in taking advantage of the good weather. Okay, let's talk about that.
Yeah, we'll do some kind of survey or something to see if what's going to work.
Okay, in the meantime, I wish you all the best. Have a wonderful weekend, and remember to count the days and make the days count, both things. Just to give you remember and even if you are not counting all the days, perhaps you should focus on Lag BOmer, the 18th. If any of you would like to receive or to get online, I can send you the calendar of the Sefirat HaOmer. The Sefirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer. Omer means sheaf of grain, a sheaf of yes, of barley that was offered at the temple and Passover time. So if you would like to receive, I can send you online, just email me, and I'd be glad to send you the calendar day by day. And the counting is preceded by a blessing. So you say, for instance, today is 3 weeks and 4 days of the counting. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu v'mitav etzivanu al Sefirat HaOmer. And then you say the day, the corresponding day. And according to Kabbalah, each day of the counting is connected to some aspects or facets of the divine, or certain virtues, certain facets of the tree of life. But this is another topic for another day, not for today. Okay, all the best.
All right.